The views expressed on this broadcast of the Take 12 Recovery Radio Show do not necessarily reflect those of KHLT Recovery Broadcasting or its affiliates. KHLT and Take12Radio.com are not affiliated with any particular 12-step fellowship.
Remember me, I'm the one down on the floor, telling these people that I ain't there no more. All in the street, just about to lose my mind.
Welcome to Walking Through the Big Book with Chris Schroeder and Monty Meyer. And now, here's those two guys who investigate prior to contempt, Chris and the Monty'man.
It's good stuff, my friends. It is a great day here broadcasting to you from Albany, Oregon. It has been absolutely gorgeous up here. And it is good stuff to be going through this wonderful book, referred to affectionately by members of Alcoholics Anonymous as the Big Book. And we've been walking through this thing now for several weeks. This is show 31. And we've been going through this thing word by word, sentence by sentence, just really doing a very thorough job. And that is with, of course, our I guess I'm the Sherpa, and you're the what would you call it? The guide.
Is that what it is?
Yeah. So you go Sherpa, oxygen. You know.
You can't do it without the Sherpas, though.
No, that's true. So, folks, if you don't know what we're talking about, that's okay. We don't either. But anyway, if you have your big book, please get it out, and your highlighters and pencils and pens or whatever you do to take notes. I really encourage you guys. I haven't talked about this a lot, but I really do encourage you guys to go through this and go through it more than once and sit down and please take notes. Do some journaling as you're going. You'll want to do that because what a great opportunity to get some real good in-depth information to pass on to others. And sometimes we don't, we run out of room on the margins and so forth in our books, since we need to make some notes in a separate. I've got 3x5 cards falling out all over the place. But I don't know about you, Chris, but a lot of times when I listen and I write, I tend to retain more.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
When you transfer something down onto paper, it makes it a much deeper experience.
We are at Chapter 10, To Employers. And, Chris, you're going to do something a little different. Tell us what's going on.
Okay, Monty, we've done this before in the show. Every once in a while where the material is at least the way I consider it, more interesting from the original manuscript than it is from the text of the Big Book, I like to jump back to the original manuscript.
Mm-hmm.
Now, again, a brief update on what that was. Bill had worked very, very hard at putting the manuscript together. It was a collaborative effort, at least for the first half of the text was really a collaborative effort. And what happened was they had an original manuscript, and it was a typed manuscript, and they passed that around prior to publication of the book. And many people made suggestions about changes that they really thought needed to happen prior to publishing the book. And why I like to go back to the original manuscript is that's really the way the alcoholics left it. They take the original manuscript and they hand it out to psychiatrists, doctors, ministers, and priests, and editors,
right.
And all of those changes. A lot of those changes were incorporated, so it ended up being a little bit of a different text, the first printing, first edition, than the way Bill had finished it off. So going back sometimes to the original manuscript, sometimes you drill a little bit deeper into what they're talking about. It has a little bit more emphasis on action, a little bit more emphasis on what you need to do rather than what we did. So this chapter to employers, it's got significant changes that were made prior to the publication in the first printing, first edition. To employers, the oral tradition states that Hank Parkhurst is basically the person who wrote this story. But if you're a big book guy, you can still hear the voice of Bill Wilson in it. So I think it was heavily redacted by Bill Wilson after Hank handed him the story. You can hear Bill Wilson's voice in it. Yet it's Hank Parkhurst, the person who really wrote this. And the reason was, Bill was just a wonderful guy, and he would surround himself with people who were enthusiastic about the same things he was enthusiastic about. And prior to the writing of this big book, Hank Parkhurst was, his buddy. And Hank was the guy who was the most enthusiastic, and Bill and Hank were, driving all around together and doing a lot of things together. They actually shared an office. Hank had an office in Newark, New Jersey, for the honor dealers. Honor Dealers was basically an organization he put together to try to break the oil monopolies. He was really upset with the Rockefellers and the people who were basically controlling oil and price fixing oil. So he wanted to get a bunch of independent people together to try to compete against these big people. And his idea was Honor Dealers, and it never went anywhere. It was a failed business. But they had the office in Newark, New Jersey, and Bill would show up every day. And instead of doing honor dealer business, Bill would co-opt Hank's secretary, and they would do versions of they would do different drafts of different chapters of the big book. So when it came to writing the chapter to employers, Hank had more experience being an employer than Bill did. Bill never really had hired or fired people or had a lot of people underneath him. He never seemed to do that. He was on Wall Street and pretty much a lone wolf for most of his career. But Hank, on the other hand, worked down on the Panama Canal and a number of other jobs where he literally had hundreds of employees, and he did a lot of the early human resource work of hiring and firing. So Bill said, Hank, you're the one who really should write this chapter. So that's the oral tradition on it. And again, I'm sure that Bill went through and did a rewrite to it. Hank relapsed very, very close to or around the time that the book Alcoholics Anonymous was printed. So he never got any real credit for this. Only from Bill himself, and Hank wasn't really well known as we moved through the history of Alcoholics Anonymous because he was pretty much unsuccessful. But he actually owned a third of the stock in the book Alcoholics Anonymous. Bill owned a third, and a third was sold to friends and AA members to publish this. So Hank actually turned in his third of the stock for a bunch of furniture or some crazy deal, like it's worth $10 million today, the stock, and he traded it in for a couple of desks or something. But that's kind of the story. That's just a little prequel to employers. I'll get started reading, and again, if you're following along in the big book, don't say, what book is he reading from? There are different changes. There's differences between the original manuscript and the story in the book Alcoholics Anonymous.
Chris, explain to people what you mean by the original manuscript. You're not talking about the first edition. You're talking about the original manuscript.
The original manuscript was what was passed around. It was, it was like a soft cover, stapled together, mimeographed thing, and they passed it around, and it was maybe you could probably call it the final edit of the book Alcoholics Anonymous prior to publication. The first edition is quite. I've actually been reading from a first edition as we've been going through this show. But the original manuscript was just passed around between AA people. It never received publication until 20 years ago or so.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, 2 employers. One of our friends, and that would be Hank Parkhurst, whose gripping story you have read. I believe that story is The Unbeliever in the first edition. A really remarkable story. Has spent much of his life in the world of big business. He has hired and fired hundreds of men. He knows the alcoholic as the employer sees him. His present views ought to prove exceptionally useful to businessmen everywhere. But let him tell you. I was at one time assistant manager of a corporation department employing 6,600 men. One day my secretary came in saying that Mr. B insisted on speaking with me. I told her to say that I was not interested. I had warned this man several times that he had but one more chance. Not long afterward, he had called me from Hartford on 2 successive days, so drunk he could hardly speak. I told him he was through, finally and forever. My secretary returned to say that it was not Mr. B on the phone, it was Mr. B's brother, and he wished to give me a message. I still expected a plea for clemency, but these words came through the receiver. I just wanted to tell you, Paul jumped from the hotel window in Hartford last Saturday. He left us a note saying you were the best boss he'd ever had and that you were not to blame in any way. Another time, as I opened a letter which lay on my desk, a newspaper clipping fell out. It was the obituary of one of the best salesmen I ever had. After 2 weeks of drinking, he had placed his foot on the trigger of a loaded shotgun. The barrel was in his mouth. I had discharged him for drinking 6 weeks before. Still another experience. A woman's voice came faintly over long distance from Virginia. She wanted to know if her husband's company's insurance was still in force. 4 days before, he had hanged himself in his woodshed. I had been obliged to discharge him for drinking, though he was brilliant, alert, and one of the best organizers I have ever known. Here were 3 exceptional men lost to this world because I did not understand as I do now. Then I became an alcoholic myself. But for the intervention of an understanding person, I might have followed in their footsteps. My downfall cost the business community unknown thousands of dollars, for it takes real money to train a man for an executive position. This kind of waste goes on unabated. Our business fabric is shot through with it, and nothing will stop it but better understanding all around. Now, this is an interesting paragraph. Basically, in this paragraph, he's saying, if I knew now what I know about the recovery program and about the steps, I probably could have helped to save the lives of 3 people who died. That's really, really powerful. And he also talks about the money it takes to train an executive. Sometimes, not always, but sometimes it's the stupidest thing a business can do is fire somebody for drinking. In this day and age, it can take $1 million to train a really high level executive, and you're going to let them go when there's actually a recovery process that may not be the best business decision. Human resource departments are good human resource, not the type of human resource department that's all for, the company and trying to figure out how to downsize and fire people without getting sued. I mean the real human resource departments that care about their human resources, understand that sometimes the best business decision is to get the guy to treatment and to make sure that they have another chance.
Sure.
You, an employer, want to understand. Nearly every modern employer feels a moral responsibility for the well-being of his help, and he usually tries to meet these responsibilities. That he has not always done so for the alcoholic is easily understood. To him, the alcoholic has often seemed to be a fool of the first magnitude. Because of the employee's special ability or of his own strong personal attachment to him, the employer has sometimes kept such a man at work long beyond the time he ordinarily would. Some employers have tried every known remedy. More often, however, there is very little patience and tolerance, and we, who have imposed on the best of employers, can scarcely blame them if they've been short with us. Here, for instance, is a typical example. An officer of one of the largest banking institutions in America knows I no longer drink. One day he told me about an executive of the same bank who, from his description, was undoubtedly alcoholic. This seemed to me like an opportunity to be helpful. So I spent a good 2 hours talking about alcoholism, the malady. I described the symptoms and supported my statements with plenty of evidence. His comment was, "Very interesting, but I'm sure this man is done drinking. He has just returned from a 3-month leave of absence, had taken a cure, looks fine, and to clinch the matter, the board of directors told him that this was his last chance." Now, this is a beautiful example of a complete misunderstanding of
sure is.
what's needed. You know, I told him that he's fired if he gets drunk again. He's not going to get drunk again. You know, that's a complete, misunderstanding of alcoholism.
Mm-hmm.
And I love the way Hank went to this guy and talked about the powerlessness, talked about the malady, for 2 hours, explained what alcoholism was. That's what I do, when I work with somebody. And when he gets done with that, the guy still doesn't get it. He still doesn't understand what powerlessness looks like and how it shows up. So he's not really interested in getting involved further than threatening to fire him if he gets drunk again.
Yeah.
My rejoinder was that if I could afford it, I would bet him 100-1 the man would go on a bigger bust than ever. I felt this was inevitable and that the bank was doing a possible injustice. Why not bring the man in contact with some of our alcoholic crowd? He might have a chance. I pointed out I had had nothing to drink whatever for 3 years, and this in the face of difficulties that would have made 9 out of 10 men drink their heads off. Why not at least afford him an opportunity to hear my story? "Oh, no," said my friend. "This chap is either through with liquor or he is minus a job. If he has your willpower and guts, he will make the grade." Again, this is a complete misunderstanding.
Mm-hmm.
And Hank was betting 100-1. Listen, the guy went and had a cure. He went for several months to a sanitarium, and he'd had the booze cure, and he was coming back. Hank still knew the guy was going to relapse.
Yeah.
And when somebody strolls into a fellowship meeting and he's just been to treatment, and he's not going to engage in the steps, I'm pretty sure he's a real alcoholic. I bet 100-1 too that they're not going to make it, because what's necessary is, remember, in the early days, what was very, very important was actually going through these steps. It's become very, very fashionable to basically discuss the challenges of everyday life in support group meetings. Back in these early days, they were about the business of getting somebody through the steps. That was what they called the cure. Although you're never cured, you're only recovered. They called it the cure in the early days. Mm-hmm. And the people that took that, they saw that they stayed sober, and the people that didn't usually got drunk. And so Hank understood that if this guy doesn't get involved in a spiritual recovery process, he's not going to make it. Doesn't matter that he had the cure. Doesn't matter that he went to treatment. And the same thing is true today. I wanted to throw up my hands in discouragement, for I saw that my banking acquaintance had missed the point entirely. He simply could not believe that his brother executive suffered from a deadly malady. There was nothing to do but wait. Presently, the man did slip, and of course was fired. Following his discharge, our group contacted him. Without much ado, he accepted our principles and procedure. He is undoubtedly on the high road to recovery. To me, this incident illustrates a lack of understanding and knowledge on the part of employers. Lack of understanding as to what really ails the alcoholic, and lack of knowledge as to what part employers might profitably take in salvaging their sick employees. Without much ado, following his discharge, our group contacted him. Without much ado, he accepted our principles and procedures. He's now on the high road to recovery. I mean, that really is a statement of hope. What they were doing back then was really working. Excuse me. To begin with, I think you employers would do well to disregard your own drinking experience or lack of it. Whether you are a hard drinker, a moderate drinker, or a teetotaler, you have but little notion of the inner workings of the alcoholic mind. I want to stop there, too, because I've got to tell you, there are a lot of non-alcoholic in support group meetings. They've found their way in there for one reason or another. And the people who are the heavy drinkers, the potential alcoholics, they do not understand the real alcoholic. They do not understand the inner workings of the alcoholic mind. I have only met very, very few people who were non-alcoholic who understood the inner workings of the alcoholic mind, and they were professionals in the treatment field. The average person who doesn't have years of training, who's not alcoholic, just you have to experience powerless, Monty, right, to really be able to understand it. Yeah.
And I think, we've heard it said, my parents or my in-laws or whoever just don't understand my alcoholism. And I think, nor should they have to. Does that make sense? We would like them to. But when it comes to people coming into the fellowship, and we've talked about this at length, and I talk about this all the time here amongst my fellows here. Boy, sometimes you might as well just drop an H-bomb on the meeting and kill everybody. We're coming in and we're saying, we can recover by, sitting on our back, looking at the stars for a couple hours a night. We'll call that meditation, and get up in the morning and ask God to guide our day, and that should do it. Well, that might do it for people that really are not alcoholic, but it's not going to avail much of anything. If you really truly are an alcoholic of the hopeless kind. I mean, there's no magic in the steps. That's just ink on paper.
Yeah.
And I think, was it you who said one time that you'd even like to see the steps not even be on the wall?
Putting the steps on the wall leads to people working the steps off the wall, and when you do that,
right,
your program is off the wall.
Yeah, exactly, and I see that all the time. And I did that, Chris, in the early years of my recovery. I read the steps on the wall, therefore I comprehended them, therefore I had done a program. That's what I thought.
There's a lot of people who think because they go to a lot of step meetings, they've taken the step.
Yeah.
It's sad to say, but I understand the hopeless alcoholic. I understand the person who has desperately tried a whole lot of different things, multiple treatments, multiple times in and out of the support groups. I understand those people, and I usually can break through to them pretty quickly because I do what this book says. I talk about the hopelessness of the malady. The hopelessness of the malady isn't the most popular thing to share in most support groups. That they want to talk about the challenges of life and how they feel about them and what's going on. They don't want to talk about powerlessness. They don't want to talk about hopelessness. They don't want to talk about a solution. There are groups that do, but they're in the minority. But I'll tell you what, if you identify yourself just from the description in this book as a real alcoholic, a hopeless alcoholic, you're gonna need the process. You're gonna need the recovery process. You're not gonna. If you're able to stay sober in the meetings, you're going to be lucky. But even if that's the case, you're going to be incredibly unhappy. You're going to be suffering from all kinds of emotional, mental, psychic trauma. Just staying sober. They understood that very, very well back in the day. That you need to be offered something more. You need to be offered a change, an attitude, an outlook.
Yeah.
So it says here, instead, you may have some pretty strong opinions, perhaps prejudices, based on your own experiences. Those of you who drink moderately are almost certain to be more annoyed with an alcoholic than a total abstainer would be. Drinking occasionally and understanding your own reactions, it is possible for you to become quite sure of many things, which so far as the alcoholic is concerned are not always so. This happens in the support groups, okay? The people who come in and are able to just put the plug in the jug, okay?
Yeah.
They don't understand the people who can't.
Mm-hmm.
And they try to tell them that it's a non-alcoholic trying to compare themselves to an alcoholic, and you will be dropping an H-bomb in that meeting.
Mm-hmm.
But if you use this textbook and the descriptions in it, if you use them correctly, you're going to see that the person who can put the plug in the jug is not described as a hopeless alcoholic in this book. They're described as a heavy drinker, a problem drinker. So again, the saddest thing is the misunderstanding that happens with relapsing alcoholics in groups filled with people who aren't alcoholic. It's the saddest thing I've seen, and it really is a shame. And the big book movement, for want of a better term, is trying to address that. The exact person AA was designed to help is not finding help in AA. So the big book movement is really trying to address that travesty of justice. And every once in a while, one of those guys is going to sidle into your meeting and annoy everybody because they're going to start talking about the problem and talking about the solution, as we're supposed to.
And Chris, I've noticed that a lot of the folks that are the heavy drinkers or the alcohol abusers, but aren't true alcoholics, they almost treat the book as if it was something that can just kind of help you while you're in the meetings. Kind of a little self-help thing on the side. Like something hanging on the wall, instead of the heart of this thing.
They're the first people who will say, it says in the book, we know only a little. My therapist says. They're the first people who are going to, say something like that, and you'll understand immediately what you're dealing with. Unfortunately.
Yeah.
All right. Let's say you're a person who wants to go to AA and wants to join up with AA. How foolish would it be to disregard the textbook?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it wouldn't make any sense at all. It'd be like signing up for a college course in photography and just saying, I don't want to read the instructions. I just want to just sit here.
And how ridiculous would it be to brag in a meeting that I don't deal with that textbook. I do it this way.
Yeah.
I mean, how stupid is it? I think we've talked about this before. Let's say you want to get a calculus experience, and you go and you sign up for calculus, and you absolutely refuse to open the textbook. You just sit in the calculus classroom listening about calculus and raising your hand and sharing and asking questions about calculus, but you never open the book, you never do any of the exercises, you never solve any of the problems, and you never get the calculus experience. That would be kind of stupid. You'd be wasting your money.
Yeah.
Now, people do this all the time in 12-step groups. They ignore the 12 steps and, hold court and act like they've really got something to share when they've got no experience with it.
Yeah.
They're sharing opinions, and all of a sudden somebody will come in and share some experience, and they'll get mad at them.
Yeah, we talked about this the other day, and this happened. I witnessed this in a meeting a couple of days ago, where a guy who he definitely is, he is an alcoholic of the hopeless variety, but he's being taught some things that are just are misleading him, and he sat there and said, "Oh, the world falling down around me, and this is happening. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do." And you brought that up a few weeks ago, and I couldn't help it.
You raised your hand.
Oh yeah, I did. And I didn't apologize. I suppose you could say I crosstalked him. I said, you know what? If I don't know what to do, it's probably because I haven't been reading the instructions. If I've got a swing set to put together and I don't know how to put it together, I don't sit there and say I don't know what to do. I read the instructions and then I do the instructions. And and I talked about how we have promises with every one of these steps. And I can't be expected to experience the promises that are in step 4 if I haven't gone through and experienced the promises that are in step 3. What am I doing? And we talk about the promises, the 9th step promises. I don't know anybody lately that I've heard read those things that pays attention to the part in the very beginning that talks about this phase of our recovery. The amends phase. We're not talking about saying you're powerless. Admitting I'm powerless and my life unmanageable isn't going to cause the promises in the 9th step to come true.
You want to shake somebody, shake a meeting up, Monty. Go in there and, as a topic, talk about the 10th step promises. Everybody will be scratching their head like, what? And that's usually because very few people have experience with the 10th step promises because they haven't done the first 9.
Yeah.
It's only the minority in the fellowships, in any fellowship. Any 12-step fellowship, only the very small minority are the people with real experience with the recovery.
Sure, you bet.
As a moderate drinker, you can take your liquor or leave it alone. Whenever you want to, you can control your drinking. Of an evening, you can go on a mild bender, get up in the morning, shake your head, and go to business. To you, liquor is no real problem. You cannot see why it should be with anyone else, save the spineless and stupid.
I need to ask you a question, though, Chris.
Yes.
What is a mild bender? Isn't that like saying jumbo shrimp?
A mild bender might be like 8 beers or 6 beers. like a non-alcoholic would say, boy, I tied one on last night.
Right.
Because I had 4 gin and tonics.
Yeah.
I would do 4 gin and tonics just to be able to start drinking the gin.
Oh, yeah, before you even got to the bar,
To get my system working.
Mm-hmm.
When dealing with an alcoholic, you have to fight an ingrained annoyance that he could be so weak, stupid, and irresponsible. Even when you understand the malady better, you may still have to check this feeling and remember that your employee is very ill, being seldom as weak and irresponsible as he appears. Powerlessness is not being weak and irresponsible, it's being powerless.
Yeah.
It's a completely different concept. It's not being morally depraved or spineless or weak. It's being powerless. Take a look at the alcoholic in your organization. Is he not usually brilliant, fast-thinking, imaginative, and likable? Remember, an alcoholic was writing this.
Yeah.
You ask an Al-Anon, and they might have some different opinions. When sober, does he not work hard and have a knack for getting things done? Review his qualities and ask yourself whether he would be worth retaining. If sober, do you owe him the same obligation you feel toward other sick employees? Like if somebody goes out on leave for cancer, do you fire him?
Yeah. No, of course
not. Is he worth salvaging? If your decision is yes, whether the reason be humanitarian or business or both, then you will wish to know what to do. The first part has to do with you. Can you stop feeling that you are dealing only with habit, with stubbornness, or a weak will? If you have difficulty about that, I suggest you reread chapters 2 and 3 of this book, where the alcoholic sickness is discussed at length. Again, for any understanding of step 1, of any understanding of powerlessness, you need to internalize chapters 2 and chapters 3. Mm-hmm. This book. Before you can be a sponsor or go help somebody, you better know chapter 2 and chapter 3, because if you can't describe the problem to the individual you're talking to, you're never going to be able to convince them of your solution.
Yeah, if they don't know, if they don't have a need, if they don't know they have a need, then why would they search for a solution?
Yeah, what do you have to offer?
Yeah.
If you can't detail the problem and then detail the solution.
Yeah.
You as a businessman know better than most that when you deal with any problem, you must know what it is. Having conceded that your employee is ill, can you forgive him for what he has done in the past? Can you shelve the resentment you may hold because of his past absurdities? Can you fully appreciate that the man has been a victim of crooked thinking directly caused by the action of alcohol in his brain? I well remember the shock I received when a prominent doctor in Chicago told me of cases where pressure of the spinal fluid actually ruptured the brain from within. No wonder an alcoholic is strangely irrational. Who wouldn't be, with such a fevered brain? Normal drinkers are not so handicapped. You know, some of their perspective on physiology is dated, but I understand what they mean.
Mm-hmm.
Your man has probably been trying to conceal a number of scrapes, perhaps pretty messy ones. They may disgust you. You may be puzzled by them, being unable to understand how such a seemingly above-board chap could be so involved. But you can generally change these, no matter how bad, to the abnormal action of alcohol on his mind. When drinking or getting over about an alcoholic, sometimes the model of honesty when normal will do incredible things. Afterward, his revulsion will be terrible. Nearly always these antics indicate nothing more than temporary aberration, and you should so treat them. Okay, if you put a quart and a half of whiskey in your body, Monty, you know, you're gonna do some things that you normally wouldn't do sober.
Yeah.
I mean, who knows what that much alcohol does to your brain? But the alcoholic goes into a blackout and, you know, is standing and conscious, but not really sane. And that's basically what what Hank is telling us here. This is not to say that all alcoholics are honest and upright when not drinking. Of course that isn't so, and you will have to be careful that such people don't impose on you. Seeing your attempt to understand and help, some will try to take advantage of your kindness. If you're sure your man does not want to stop, you may as well discharge him. The sooner the better. You are not doing him a favor by keeping him on. Firing such an individual may prove a blessing to him. It may be just the jolt he needs. I know in my own particular case that nothing my company could have done would have stopped me for so long as I was able to hold my position. I could not possibly realize how serious my situation was. Had they fired me first, and had they then taken steps to see that I was presented with a solution contained in this book, I might have returned to them 6 months later, a well man. But there are many men who want to stop right now, and with them you can go far. If you make a start, you should be prepared to go the limit, not in the sense that any great expense or trouble is to be expected, but rather in the matter of your own attitude, your understanding treatment of the case. Perhaps you have such a man in mind. He wants to quit drinking, and you want to help him, even if it only be a matter of good business. You know something of alcoholism because you read chapters 2 and 3. You see that he is mentally and physically sick. You are willing to overlook his past performances. Suppose you call the man in and go at him like this. This is probably the first example of an intervention, an employment intervention. Hit him point blank with that thought that you know all about his drinking and that it must stop. Say you appreciate his abilities, would like to keep him, but cannot if he continues to drink. That you mean just what you say, and you should mean it too. Next, assure him that you are not proposing to lecture, moralize, or condemn. That if you have done so formally, it was because you misunderstood. Say, if you possibly can, that you have no hard feelings toward him. At this point, bring out the idea of alcoholism, the sickness. Enlarge on that fully, as it's done in Chapter 2 and 3. Remark that you have been looking into the matter. You are sure of what you say, hence your change of attitude. Hence your willingness to deal with the problem as though it were a disease. You are willing to look at your man as a gravely ill person with this qualification, being perhaps fatally ill. Does your man want to get well, and right now? You ask because many alcoholics being warped and drugged do not want to quit, but does he? Will he take every necessary step, submit to anything to get well, to stop drinking forever? If he says yes, this is the same kind of qualification we go over when we're attempting to take somebody through the steps.
Mm-hmm.
If he says yes, does he really mean it, or down inside does he think he is fooling you? And that after rest and treatment he will be able to get away with a few drinks now and then. Probe your man thoroughly on these points. Be satisfied he's not deceiving himself or you. Not a word about this book unless you are sure you ought to introduce it at this juncture. If he temporizes and still thinks he can ever drink again, even beer, you may as well discharge him after the next bender, which, if an alcoholic he is certain to have. Tell him that emphatically and mean it. Either you are dealing with a man who can and will get well, or you are not. If not, don't waste time with them. This may seem severe, but it is usually the best course. They need to say, yes, I'm willing to quit drinking. I want to quit drinking for good and for all, and I'm willing to go to any length to do it.
Mm-hmm.
After satisfying yourself that your man wants to recover and that he will go to any extreme to do so, you may suggest a definite course of action. For most alcoholics who are drinking or who are just getting over a spree, a certain amount of physical treatment is desirable, detoxing, even imperative. Some physicians favor cutting off the liquor sharply and prefer to use little or no sedative. This may be wise in some instances, but for most of us, it is barbaric torture. For severe cases, some doctors prefer a slower tapering down process followed by a health farm or sanitarium, and that's the way it is today. They'll put you on Ativan, they'll put you on Librium today. It's insane if somebody is a heavy-duty alcoholic to just take the alcohol away from them.
Yeah.
They could die in the DTs.
Yep.
Other doctors prefer a few days of detoxification, removal of poisons from the system by cathartics, belladonna, and the like, followed by a week of mild exercise and rest. Again, they don't do it this way anymore, but that's a medical procedure, and those have changed. Having tried them all, I personally favor the latter, though the matter of physical treatment should, of course, be referred to your own doctor. Whatever the method, its object should be to thoroughly clear mind and body of the effects of alcohol. In competent hands, this seldom takes long, nor should it be very expensive. Your man is entitled to be placed in such physical condition that he can think straight and no longer physically crave liquor. Okay, as long as liquor's in your system, you crave it if you're an alcoholic.
Mm-hmm.
So they say we favor hospitalization for the befogged. In the early days during the 12-step calls, they would put you in the hospital and make sure you were detoxed. And then they would come in and start talking to you. These handicaps must be removed if you're going to give him the chance you want him to have. Propose such a procedure to him. Offer to advance the cost of treatment if necessary, but make it plain that any expense will later be deducted from his pay. Make him fully responsible. It is much better for him. Okay, that really is a good principle. And remember, all they're recommending in this book is detox. They really never recommend the 28-day or the 98-day thing that we see today, Monty. They recommend detox, and then they recommend the AA program.
Mm-hmm.
When your man accepts your offer, point out that physical treatment is but a small part of the picture. Though you are providing him with the best possible medical attention, he should understand that he must undergo a change of heart. To get over drinking will require a transformation of thought and attitude. He must place recovery above everything, even home and business. For without recovery, he will lose both. I love that line. So many people amble into to sobriety and amble into the 12-step fellowships, Monty, but they don't make it a priority in their life.
Yeah.
The things that happen in their family or the things that happen in their business always take precedence. This book is basically saying if you do that, if you allow business or family life to override your needs as far as your recovery process, you're probably going to lose all of it, your recovery, your business, and your family.
We have a slogan out here. I don't know if you have it out there or not, but I got sober, I got a job, I got a car, I got a girlfriend, I got drunk. Yeah. You allow the things that recovery gave you take you away from recovery. Mm-hmm. And here's the one that just it's like fingernails on a chalkboard to me. Well, okay, I know my family has to come after recovery. My recovery comes before my family. Recovery comes before my job, but it can't come before God. God comes first. And I look at that person and I'm thinking, what? That's just a ridiculous thing to say. I mean, that goes without saying. What do you think this is all about?
Yeah.
Ding-a-ling?
And why would God drag you away from the recovery
Yeah.
process? That would make no sense either.
I get that from some of my friends that have been involved in their faith and have fallen into alcoholism or have dealt with it most of their lives, and they don't understand yet, and they think, by golly, Sunday comes first, and if I'm gonna, if I'll drink all week, but doggone it, Sunday I'm gonna stay sober. I'm not gonna go to a meeting.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. Yeah.
I really see, if you're going to the meetings Monday through Saturday, I don't really see a problem taking a day off to go to church. What I've seen though is the most dangerous thing I've seen is I've seen people who are really involved in their religion basically come into AA to try to find converts and then drag them out of the recovery fellowships and into their faith, and then really don't take responsibility when the individual relapses.
Right. Right.
It's their fault. It's not the person's fault who's relapsing.
They didn't pray hard enough.
Quite often.
Yeah, I do too.
Show that you have every confidence in his ability to recover. While on the subject of confidence, tell him that so far as you are concerned, this will be a strictly personal matter. His alcoholic derelictions, the treatment about to be undertaken, these will never be discussed without his consent. Cordially wish him success and say you want to have a long chat with him on his return. To return to the subject matter of this book, it contains, as you have seen, full directions by which your employee may solve his problem. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Full directions by which your employee may solve his problem. They're basically saying if you do the things in this book, your problem is solved.
You said, okay, in the manuscript you're reading, you're saying it says full direction, correct?
Yes.
In my book, which is the third edition, it says full suggestions. Interesting change, huh?
Well, somebody told Bill, instead of saying directions, you should say suggestions. Instead of saying you need to, say we did.
Yeah, we don't want to offend anyone.
Yeah, we certainly don't want to offend anybody who's going to die if they don't do this.
Yeah.
I really don't mind offending people.
I don't
rather
either.
Step on your feelings than step on your grave.
Yeah.
To you, some of the ideas which it contains are novel. Perhaps some of them don't make sense to you. Possibly you are not quite in sympathy with the approach we suggest. By no means do we offer it as the last word on this subject, but so far as we are concerned, it has been the best word so far. Our approach often does work. After all, you are looking for results rather than methods. Whether your employee likes it or not, he will learn the grim truth about alcoholism. That won't hurt him a bit, though he does not go for the remedy at first. I suggest you draw our book to the attention of the doctor who is to attend your patient during treatment. Ask that the book be read the moment the patient is able, while he is acutely depressed if possible. The doctor should approve a spiritual approach. And besides, he ought to tell the patient the truth about his condition, whatever that happens to be. The doctor should encourage him to acquire a spiritual experience. At this stage, it will be just as well if the doctor does not mention you in connection with the book. Above all, neither you, the doctor, nor anyone should place himself in a position of telling the man he must abide by the contents of this volume. The man must decide for himself. You cannot command him, you can only encourage. And you will surely agree that it may be better to withhold any criticism you may have of our method until you see whether it works. You are betting, of course, that your changed attitude and the contents of this book will turn the trick. In some cases it will, and in others it will not. But we think that if you persist, the percentage of successes will gratify you. When our work spreads and our numbers increase, we hope your employees may be put in personal contact with some of us, which, needless to say, will be more effective. Meanwhile, we are sure a great deal can be accomplished if you will follow the suggestions of this chapter. Think about that, Monty. They're really expecting you to be able to just do the instructions in this book without any contact with any other recovered alcoholics. That's one of the things that's been forgotten about this book. This was supposed to provide mail order recovery.
Mm-hmm.
Now they found through experience that it's a lot easier for people to buy into this process if there's other people that they can see who have bought into it and who are recovered. There's no doubt about that. But as the fellowship was growing, they didn't have meetings everywhere. They had 2 meetings. So, they really expected this volume to be able to produce mail-order recovery, and in many cases it has. Like I say, though, the majority of the success has come from spreading it, one alcoholic to the other.
Yeah.
On your employee's return, call him in and ask him what happened. Ask him if he thinks he has the answer. Get him to tell you how he thinks it will work and what it has to be about, what he has to do about it. Make him feel free to discuss his problems with you if he cares to. Show him you understand and that you will not be upset by anything he wishes to say. In this connection, it is important that you remain undisturbed if the man proceeds to tell you things which shock you. He may, for example, reveal that he has padded his expense account, or that he has planned to take your best customers away from you. In fact, he may say almost anything if he's accepted our solution, which, as you know, demands rigorous honesty. Charge this off as you would a bad account and start afresh with him. If he owes you money, make terms which are reasonable. From this point on, never rake up the past unless he wants to discuss it. If he speaks of his home situation, be patient and make helpful suggestions. Let him see that he can talk frankly with you so long as he does not bear tales or criticize others. With the kind of employee you want to keep, such an attitude will command undying loyalty. The greatest enemies of the alcoholic are resentment, jealousy, envy, frustration, and fear. Wherever men are gathered together in business, there will be rivalries, and arising out of these a certain amount of office politics. Sometimes the alcoholic has an idea that people are trying to pull him down. Often this is not so at all, but sometimes his drinking will be used as a basis of criticism. One instance comes to mind in which a malicious individual was always making friendly little jokes of an alcoholic's drinking exploit. In another case, an alcoholic was sent to a hospital for treatment. Only a few knew of it at first, but within a short time, it was billboarded throughout the entire company. Naturally, this sort of thing decreases a man's chance of recovery. The employer should make it his business to protect the victim from this kind of talk if he can. The employer cannot play favorites, but he can always try to defend the man from needless provocation and unfair criticism. As a class, alcoholics are energetic people. They work hard and they play hard. Your man will be on his mettle to make good. Being somewhat weakened and faced with physical and mental readjustment to a life which knows no alcohol, he may overdo. Don't let him work 16 hours a day just because he wants to. Encourage him to play once in a while. Make it possible for him to do so. He may wish to do a lot for other alcoholics, and something of the sort may come up during business hours. Don't begrudge him a reasonable amount of time. This work is necessary to maintain his sobriety. So, Monty, what's necessary to maintain somebody's sobriety?
The work?
Going out and doing 12-step
Yeah,
calls.
going out and doing the taking this thing to the alcoholic who still suffers, man. And you know, here's something that I think of that primary purpose thing, you know? What is our primary purpose? And it's interesting that if a meeting, and this is just my opinion now, but this stirs things up in me right here, that if a meeting is of a particular nature, if it's, let's say it's a closed meeting, and somebody comes in and he doesn't know if he's an alcoholic or not. I mean, he's confused. He wants help. He's not even sure what an alcoholic is. He comes in. He's in tears. Can you help me? Well, this is a closed meeting. You know, you have to know if you're an alcoholic or not, because I've heard this. Well, at that point, I think our primary purpose should take over.
Yeah, are you being of maximum usefulness,
right,
God and your fellow man, by throwing them out?
Because I think blocking people, you know, picking and choosing who you're going to help in the sense of, you know, the color of their skin, the way they dress or smell, you know, that kind of thing, that is going to, you know what's going to happen? That kind of attitude towards your fellow man is going to lead you back into a place of selfish self-centeredness, and you'll drink again.
You know, my own personal opinion is if you're in a 12-step fellowship that's closed and somebody comes in who doesn't identify themselves as the right entity.
Yeah.
First of all, you have to ask yourself, does he even know what
right.
the definition of that is?
Yeah.
Has anybody sat with him? Somebody should get with the individual and talk to them about the problem, about what powerlessness is. If it's an alcohol fellowship, talk to them about alcoholism. If it's a drug fellowship, talk to them about what being a drug addict is. But you don't shame them and you don't throw them out. They may never come back. I've seen it happen that a group conscience will break out and they'll say, let's open this meeting up, and talk about step one. I think that's an appropriate way to go, because sometimes the only requirement for membership in some of these fellowships is ridiculous. Really, like all right, let's just say the only requirement for membership in a particular fellowship would be the desire to stop drinking. I can't say that I have the desire to stop drinking, Monty. I stopped. I have the desire to stay stopped.
Yeah.
It's a completely different thing.
Right.
So you have to understand that you're there. You're there to be helpful. Mm-hmm. It helps your program to be helpful. What kind of a horse's patoot are you to be the guy to raise his hand and say, "Get out of here! This is closed."
Yeah.
What kind of recovery is that?
And I've sat there. I know the guy, and he is just as bold as can be, and it drives me nuts. He'll say, "Are you an alcoholic?" Well, I don't know. Well, then I'd like you to leave. And I sit there stunned. I can't believe that somebody would actually do that. It just blows my mind.
That's intolerant and it's judgmental.
It's horrible.
And listen, I'm all for any group that has a primary purpose.
Yeah.
Any group that wants participation to be alcoholic or participation to be drug addict or cocaine addict or whatever. They have the right to their primary purpose, but you don't use directives. You don't use traditions to hurt people. That's not what they're for.
Yeah.
They're there to protect the integrity of the fellowship. But if you're hurting individuals, that really hurts the integrity of the fellowship. Have somebody qualify. You're supposed to be qualifying people anyway. In the early days, nobody went to the meetings first. They went through the steps first. They weren't even invited to the meetings until they had a clue. Today anybody can wander into a fellowship, without a clue.
And see, a lot of people.
And again, a responsible member will take responsibility and try to get some of that individual's time, and at least explain to them what the heck is going on. I mean, if you don't have informed members, you're going to have chaos in your group.
Yeah. My good friend Bruce always says, the steps didn't come out of the meetings. The meetings came out of the steps.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Where were we here anyway? Let's see.
I think we are. Well, I can't even tell you because I'm on the manuscript. But it says, after your man has gone along without drinking for a few months, try to make use of his services with other employees who are giving you the alcoholic runaround, provided, of course, they are willing to have a third party in the picture. Don't hesitate to let the alcoholic who has recovered but holds a relatively unimportant job talk to a man with a better position. Being on a radically different basis of life, he will never take advantage of the situation. Monty, what I would do is I usually kept it quiet that I was a recovered alcoholic, except with the human resource department. I would let them know because they are going to be the people who have to deal with the alcohol problems, and I would tell them. I would say, I haven't had a drink in so many years. I'm a recovered alcoholic. I can really be of help if you have an alcoholic problem or an alcoholic employee who wants to have help or needs to talk. I'm available, and I would let the human resource department know. I wouldn't let everybody know, but I would let the human resource department know.
Yeah. I think. Have you ever found this true? I think some employers treat the alcoholic with more respect than we do within the fellowship.
Yeah, well, there's HIPAA and there's anti-discrimination things these days. Alcoholism and drug addiction are diseases, and if you discriminate against somebody for them in the right way, you can have a discrimination suit. There's no doubt about it. So you kind of have to be careful. You must trust your man. Long experience with alcoholic excuses naturally makes you suspicious. When his wife next calls saying he is sick, don't jump to the conclusion he is drunk. If he is and is still trying to recover upon our basis, he will presently tell you about it, even if it means the loss of his job. For he knows he must be honest if he would live at all. Let him see you are not bothering your head about him at all, that you are not suspicious, nor are you trying to run his life so he will be shielded from temptation to drink. If he is conscientiously following the program of recovery, he can go anywhere your business may call him. Do not promote him, however, until you are sure. In case he does stumble, even once, you will have to decide whether to let him go. If you are sure he doesn't mean business, there is no doubt you should discharge him. If, on the contrary, you are sure he is doing his utmost, you may wish to give him another chance. But you should feel under no obligation to do so, for your obligation has been discharged already. In any event, don't let him fool you, and don't let sentiment get the better of you if you are sure he ought to go. There's another thing you might do. If your organization is a large one, your junior executives might be provided with this book. You might let them know you have no quarrel with the alcoholics of your organization. These juniors are often in a difficult position. Men under them are frequently their friends. So for one reason or another, they cover these men, hoping matters will take a turn for the better. They often jeopardize their own positions by trying to help serious drinkers who should have been fired long ago, or else given an opportunity to get well. After reading this book, a junior executive can go to such a man and say, "Look here, Ed, do you want to stop drinking or not? You put me on the spot every time you get drunk. It isn't fair to me or the firm. I've been learning something about alcoholism, and if you are an alcoholic, you're a mighty sick man. You sure act like one. The firm wants to help you get over it if you are interested. There is a way out, and I hope you have sense enough to try it. If you do, your past will be forgotten, and this fact that you went away for treatment will not be mentioned. But if you cannot or will not stop drinking, I think you ought to resign." Your junior executive may not agree with the contents of our book. He need not and often should not show it to his alcoholic prospect, but at least he will understand the problem and will no longer be less misled by ordinary promises. He will be able to take a position with such a man which is eminently fair and square. He will have no further reason for covering up an alcoholic employee. It boils right down to this. No man should be fired just because he is alcoholic. If he wants to stop, he should be afforded a real chance. If he cannot or does not want to stop, he should usually be discharged. The exceptions are few. We think this method of approach will accomplish several things for you. It will promptly bring drinking situations to light. It will enable you to restore good men to useful activity. At the same time, you will feel no reluctance to rid yourselves of those who cannot or will not stop. Alcoholism may be causing your organization considerable damage in its waste of money, men, and reputation. We hope our suggestions will help you plug up this sometimes serious leak. We do not expect you to become a missionary, attempting to save all who happen to be alcoholic. Being a businessman, it is enough these days, but we can sensibly urge that you stop this waste and give your worthwhile man a chance. The other day, an approach was made to the vice president of a large industrial concern. He remarked, "I'm mighty glad you fellows got over your drinking, but the policy of this company is not to interfere with the habits of our employees. If a man drinks so much that his job suffers, we fire him. I don't see how you can be of any help to us, for as you see, we don't have any alcoholic problem. This same company spends millions for research every year. Their cost of production is figured to a fine decimal point. They have recreational facilities. There is company insurance. There is real interest, both humanitarian and business, in the well-being of employees. But alcoholism, well, they just don't have it." Perhaps this is a typical attitude. We who have collectively seen a great deal of business life, at least from the alcoholic angle, had to smile at this gentleman's opinion. He might be shocked if he knew how much alcoholism costs his organization every year. That company may harbor many actual or potential alcoholics. We believe that managers of large enterprises often have little idea how prevalent this problem is. Perhaps this is a guess, but we have a hunch it's a good one. If you still feel your organization has no alcoholic problem, you might well take another look down the line. You may make some interesting discoveries. Of course, this chapter refers to alcoholics, sick people, deranged men, Monty. What our friend, the vice president, had in mind was the habitual or whoopee drinker. As to them, his policy is probably sound. But as you see, he does not distinguish between such people and the alcoholic. And again, that's one of the big problems today, distinguishing between the habitual or whoopee drinker and the alcoholic. Being a businessman, you might like to have a summary of this chapter. Here it is. 1. Acquaint yourself with the nature of alcoholism. 2. Be prepared to discount and forget your man's past. 3. Confidentially offer him medical treatment and cooperation provided you think he wants to stop. 4. Have the alcohol thoroughly removed from his system and give him a suitable chance to recover physically. 5. Have the doctor in attendance present him with this book, but don't cram it down his throat. 6. Have a frank talk with him when he gets back from his treatment, assuring him of your full support, encouraging him to say anything he wishes about himself, and making it clear the past will not be held against him. 7. Ask him to place recovery from alcoholism ahead of all else. 8. Don't let him overwork. 9. Protect him when justified from malicious gossip. 10. If after you have shot the works he will not stop, then let him go. It is not to be expected that you give your alcoholic employee disproportionate amount of time and attention. He is not to be made a favorite. The right kind of man, the kind who recovers, will not want this sort of thing. He will not impose upon you. Far from it. He will work like the devil and thank you to his dying day. Today I own a little company. There are 2 alcoholic employees who produce as much as 5 normal salesmen. Well, why not? They have a better way of life, and they have been saved from the living death. I have enjoyed every moment spent in getting them straightened out. You, Mr. Employer, may have the same experience.
Very good. Very good. There's a lot of great suggestions in this chapter that a sponsor should heed as well.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
No doubt about it. No doubt about it. It's they're parallel. The suggestions to the employers is they basically come out of the chapter working with others. They're sound principles for working with the alcoholic.
Ah, boy, good stuff. Good stuff. If you're an employer out there and you're dealing with any of this, or you know somebody that is, please go back and play this again and listen to it. Open up your big book, or if you know somebody who's never read this book before, I recommend this book to everyone because sooner or later, at the very least, there's going to be somebody that you know that's going to need some help with the way things are going in the world today. And it might not be alcohol, but the problem is still the same. My wife and I were talking the other day, Chris, about the problem and the solution. I kind of, for my own life, I kind of look at step one as I admitted I was powerless over my separation from God, and that my life had become unmanageable.
There you go.
Yeah,
that's a good way to look at it.
And that's the problem's the same. The solution is also the same. And I think everybody should have this book in their library of books. And it's not, friends, it's not another self-help book. That's not what it is. We joke about it, our friends at Hazelden. The largest publisher of self-help books are people whose problem was self-help. Yeah. We joke around about that, but we love those guys. But this is a new way of living, and I recommend this book to anybody. And you can go to, we have several links on our on our site to take you to pick up one of these books, Alcoholics Anonymous. Next week, A Vision for You, and that is our last chapter in Walking Through the Big Book, correct?
Well, I think we'll do Dr. Bob's Nightmare. In all fairness, we did Bill's story.
Oh, that's interesting, because I was thinking that the other day. You just reminded me of it. I think that's a good idea.
I think that's a good idea too.
Yeah, awesome. All right, my friend Chris Schroeder, thank you once again.
Monty, it's always a pleasure. This is something I've had a lot of fun doing.
And folks, I'm just going to warn you right now, we may be embarking on another series called The 12 Traditions.
Yes, absolutely.
If you haven't had enough of us already. Well, Chris, thank you once again. You have a great rest of the evening.
Monty, you take care.
Okay, and my friends, don't forget to come back next week when once again Chris Schroeder and the Monty'man walk through the big book. Bye-bye.
This has been a broadcast of KHLT Recovery Broadcasting.